Latin America, a place of constant bloodshed and political struggle during the 1800s. Contrasting political systems among nations created an undeniable need for power. It was threatened by new imperialist regimes that sought new territory. However, it was this constant struggle that shaped Latin America into what it is today.
Hello, and welcome to 16 Minutes, a special on Latin American imperialism. I'm your host, Trey Fitz, alongside with
Alton Gayton. We have a very informative and entertaining special for you all today. Our highly educated specialists and guests will be discussing various topics such as the economy, military and expansion, the Panama Canal, and foreign policy.
We hope you enjoy the program.
Before we go any further, I have a question. Why were all these Latin American states fighting for independence in the first place?
Great question. One of the main problems was the lack of participatory government due to the preserved centralization of the political system. A large amount of dependence was placed upon the government, and the government couldn't really,
Couldn't help out.
they couldn't help out the people. So this distributed wealth unequally, which made the Latin American citizens look to Western Enlightenment ideas for thought, such as liberty, revolutions, and equality, which actually led to many revolutions in Latin America. There's also a strain on the economies due to all the capitalist demands made by Europe, and that's actually what we're going to discuss in our first segment.
Let's jump right into that. We now have an exciting special plan on the economy of Latin America with revered Dr. Allen, a highly recognized historian at Harvard University. Dr. Allen, in this special, you will first give us some background information on the general economy of Latin America. Then we will give you various subtopics, and you will have 25 seconds each to give us and our viewers as much information as you can.
Alright, what would you like to know first?
What was the overall economy of Latin America like between 1820 and 1850?
Well, between 1820 and 1850, the economy was very stagnant and inconsistent due to many wars being fought over independence. These wars destroyed roads, industries, and morale. However, Cuba, being one of the few colonies still controlled by Europe, Spain in particular, prospered mainly because of their trade in cash crops such as sugar.
Were there any single factors that helped put the economy back on its feet during this time period?
Yes, the invention of the steamship in the 1840s helped increase the rate of trade. Products that were very high in demand in Europe due to the Industrial Revolution were exported faster, thus kickstarting the economy once again. Later, the production of railroads became common and seen as practical in the 1860s.
At what point was the economy finally back on its feet?
After the decades of warfare and excessive military spending that disrupted the economy finally improved once Latin America products were exported rapidly to the demanding European nations.
What products from Latin America did Europeans value?
Coffee was the main export of Brazil, while hides and wool were the main products exported by Argentina. Chile mainly exported minerals and grains, and Peru exported guano or bird droppings.
And this brings us to our speed challenge, in which you must give us as much information as possible in each of these countries and their exports in 25 seconds. Are you ready?
Yes.
Brazil.
By 1840, coffee exports made up more than 40% of the all total exports, and by 1880, that number reached 60%. Society continued developing around this production, and many plantations were made. More than 1.4 million Africans were imported to Brazil during this time to help with the production. Almost 11,000 tons of cocoa were being exported. Britain was quite pleased with this colony.
Argentina.
Argentine beef and its production played a major role in the culture of Argentina. Landowners became wealthy, so they built large, important buildings that contributed to the creation of a political system, society, and philanthropy. The exports of beef and wool combined led to foreign trade becoming 5 times as great as it was before, increase in wages, and a tripling of production as a result of the expanding agricultural economy.
Chile.
The discovery of silver and chinchilla spurred mass amounts of people to move closer to the outpost. The surrounding areas experienced a demographic and urbanistic growth during this rush. Chile became the center of trade of minerals in South America. Rich miners implemented their commerce into banks and agricultural centers throughout all of Chile, creating an economic boom.
Peru.
The beginning of the guano boom of 1845 in Peru sparked economic growth throughout the nation. Guano, or fertilizer bird droppings, were in high demand in Europe and exported in mass quantities. The monetary gain from the exports was used to repay war debts and build new railroads and highways.
That's all, Dr. Allen. Thanks for coming. Don't go anywhere, folks. We'll be right back after the break. The sky, bringer of life along the land. It provides water, sunlight, snow, and bird poop. The most important of these is bird poop. This guano fertilizer brings nutrients to the land, giving any crop the food it needs to grow larger and more prosperous. Purchase it now at your closest farmer depot. Get yours today for a price of $29.99.
Welcome back to our 16-minute special report.
Now for the weather.
Take it away, Ibrahim.
Welcome to the special Weather Point of the Decades. Starting in the year 1790, I'll be giving you a 100-year forecast. We're starting off in the Caribbean with a series of rebellions in Haiti, with some stormy weather. In the 1800s, the stormy weather moves out as Haiti declares independence. Now in the 1810s, we're in Mexico, a stormy cold front moves in as rebellions against Spain are led by Father Hidalgo. Watch out for tornadoes. In the 1820s, a large upper atmospheric air mass from the U.S. moves into Latin America as it blocks any outside air masses such as the eastern wind from Europe. In the 1830s, Venezuela, Colombia, and Ecuador formed from Gran Colombia as Simon Bolivar dies. As we roll into the 1840s, an area of low pressure moves into Mexico as it wars with the U.S. over Texas. After that, in the 1850s, a stationary front then moves in the form of Benito Juárez's liberal reforms. That was in the 1860s, a hot air mass moves into the Mexico with the French intervention. Right after that, in the 1870s, a cold front moves in through Mexico as Porfirio Diaz takes power. Also, high temperatures in Cuba as the Spanish-Cuba War ensues. As we move into the 1880s, some well-deserved cold weather comes into Brazil and Cuba as they both abolish slavery. Lastly, the 1890s. Unfortunately, the Cuban-Spanish-American War starts along with the massive Hurricane Theodore. Also, in Central America, the Panama Canal starts construction, so there's bound to be some interesting weather. Now to the decade's forecast. As you can see, there has been a general drop in temperatures due to the westernization of many countries as they became republics and stabilized their politics. Now, back to the desk.
Thank you, Ibrahim. Next up, military and expansion. Movements for independence in Latin American countries began to have more impact during the 1800s. Mexico City was among the first nations to break away and form their own nation after several attempts. Secondary areas in South America and the Caribbean opted for independence soon after, such as Peru, which was actually the last country to break away from Spain. Countries such as Peru and Cuba were very fearful of slave rebellions, and that's why they stayed with Spain for as long as they did.
To help understand how the Spanish felt during their struggles, we have an old clip from the 1900s about famed Spanish General Valeriano.
Hello, I'm here with General Valeriano. What was your part in the Spanish-American War?
I fought for the Spanish in the Canary Islands and the Philippines before being made the governor of Cuba with hopes of restoring political balance.
Can you explain what caused the political imbalance in Cuba?
There were disagreements between the Cubans and the Spanish which prompted revolutions. I was sent in to repress the Liberation Army which hoped to free Cuba from Spanish control. The Liberation Army was a small portion of the Cuban army during the Cuban Revolution. Despite not having any commanders, they maintained great influence.
How did you attempt to stop the Liberation Army?
I created a reconstruction plan which was an attempt to separate the rebels from the native Cubans. Because when we arrived in Cuba, we noticed that the rebels were hard to locate as they blended in so well with the regular population.
What were you expecting when you were going into Cuba?
I was planning on quickly restoring order so we could get back to war with the Americans. I was certainly expecting it to be an easy win.
Were things different from what you expected?
Our fighting tactics were thrown off because we were unaccustomed to the heat and warfare of Cuba. It was also surprisingly hard to pick out the rebels from the civilians, which is why I originally created my reconstruction plan.
Tell me more about this reconstruction plan. How did it work?
It was an attempt to separate the rebels and the civilians by placing Cuban civilians in reconcentration camps. Unfortunately, due to malnutrition and close confines in the camps, thousands of people died, including women and children. The Americans and the Cubans were angered by this, and I lost great support, which is why I resigned from my position 5 years ago. I believe that North America is now in control of Cuba. The Cubans had hoped that North America would allow them to be their own country, but so far no gains have been made.
Wow, he sure kept the bigger picture in mind when thinking about his country, even though Cuba did end up losing to the Americas in the end.
Yeah, it's very sad. It takes a strong man and even stronger will to persevere through such a brutal war. Next up, we have a never-before-seen interview from 1914 with former President Theodore Roosevelt. He sat down with our retired reporter, Jessica Gustines.
Let's cut to the tape now.
I'm here with President Theodore Roosevelt to discuss the construction of the Panama Canal.
I'm happy to be here.
Now, there's been a lot of controversy surrounding the construction of the canal zone and the U.S.'s land around it. What were the most important factors that really ultimately led you to the decision to go through with construction?
Well, really the most important factor would be growth. And not just the United States, but the whole world can benefit from this. It allows more merchants and traders to move products all across the world, and who wouldn't want that? I mean, I believe this controversy was over the fact that we established the United States territory in a foreign country rather than people disputing the obvious benefits.
Interesting. Now, why exactly is this construction necessary? Could you explain to the viewers how Latin America and the U.S. will benefit from trade and power?
You know, I'm frankly amazed that there's any question at all. I mean, while the canal is a huge source of trade all over the world, the traffic from merchants passing through Panama will be unlike anything that they've ever had, really, and certainly couldn't have achieved otherwise. The canal had already begun construction when we arrived and took over the effort from the French. You see, they were having trouble with the malaria due to the massive mosquitoes, but anyhow, the canal shortens the time it takes to transport valuable goods across the Americas from the Atlantic Ocean to the Pacific Ocean by days and even weeks. This increase can increase the possibility of goods that can be traded, as well as brings power, attention, and revenue to an otherwise small and hardly worth mentioning country in Central America, that then paves new opportunities for the rest of Latin America to prosper.
Great! So, many argue that you don't really have the authority to build the canal on Panamanian soil. Could you explain how your presidency gives you authority to do this?
Well, the Panamanian government in its current state wouldn't even exist if it weren't for the United States claiming Panamanian territory. I said it going into it that we were dealing with a government of bandits, and I was fully prepared at once to occupy the isthmus anyhow, and proceed to dig the canal. But I deemed it likely that there would be a government revolution in Panama soon. Sure enough, there was a local revolt soon afterwards, which threatened the government, and I sent a part of my navy to assist the new government. We paid a significant amount of money to control what was the canal zone, and therefore made that 553-mile strip of land containing the Panama Canal United States territory. And this is what gives me the right to profit from this trade. I knew that this would cause some tension, but I also knew that someone had to take control, and that person had to be me.
Wonderful. So, do you have any last words to any who are still opposed to the construction?
The canal was by far the most important action I have taken in foreign affairs during the time that I'm president. When nobody could or would exercise sufficient authority, I exercised it. The Panama Canal has made worldwide trade easier, and I believe it was worth the hassle.
Thank you for being here with us today.
My pleasure.
Back to you, Bob.
Very informative facts there.
Yes. But who is Bob?
Oh, I have no idea. We now have an interview planned between our reporter Dan Isat and historian Abigail Turner.
Over to you, Dan.
We are here today with Abigail Turner, a historian who specializes in the history of the Panama Canal.
Thank you for having me here.
Let's get started. So we all know that many different nations have controlled the Panama Canal during its construction and use. Can you please tell us the impact this has had on the power of the Panama?
Well, the French originally took on the construction of the canal zone because they owned the land in Panama before the U.S. took it over from them. When the U.S. bought the land, they established the Canal Zone, which then made that land U.S. territory. This meant that the Panamanians had to abide by the rules that were established by the United States. This meant that they couldn't work on the Canal Zone, and they could also not be in the Canal Zone at all. This also meant that the Panamanian government couldn't benefit from the increased trade that was made possible by the canal. They've basically been gaining more and more power over the past 15 years.
You say that the Panama's been regaining more and more power over the past 15 years. Can you please tell us what you mean by this?
Well, they've actually been gaining more power over the past 50 years. In the 1970s, there were 2 treaties established. One gave partial power back to the Panamanians, and another one ensured permanent neutrality of the canal. Then in 1999, on December 31st, 12 hours before the 21st century, the U.S. relinquished all power over the Canal Zone and gave the Canal Zone in its entirety back to the Panamanians. It's still an ongoing piece of history.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you for having me here.
And we'll be back after this commercial break.
Hey, you! Yeah, you! Are you an educated citizen living in a suburban area?
Yeah.
Then you should read my book! My name is Jose Hernandez, and I've written a book on Martin Fierro and his important role in the struggle of Argentina from Spain. Order your own copy for only $9.95. That's right, only $9.95. But get your own copy.
Welcome back to our 16-minute special report newscast.
The Monroe Doctrine, which was introduced on December 2nd of 1823, attempted to keep the Old World out of the Americas under the disguise of protecting the newly freed colonies in Latin and South America so that the United States could actually exert its own influence on Latin America without opposition from Europe. Let's see what some people had to say about the Monroe Doctrine.
Hey everybody, I'm in 19th century America, and right next to me is John Schmidt, an avid supporter of the American Whig Party. Now, Mr. Schmidt, what is your take on the Monroe Doctrine? Are you for or against it?
You can bet your britches I support the Monroe Doctrine. We're America, and it is our duty under God's will to protect those newly freed Latin American colonies from Old World invasions. Plus, it gives us the chance to take what's ours later on. Manifest destiny, you know what I mean?
Now that we have an American farmer's opinion, let's go see how the Mexican peasants think.
Those Americans think we're too stupid to realize that their interventionism will make it hard to resist when they try to conquer us later on through progressive imperialism. We may not have the resources to defend ourselves, but we sure will try.
Let's head back to the newsroom, where we have a reputable historian who will inform us about the Monroe Doctrine and how it infected imperialism in Latin America.
Here with us is Karen Hedlick-Brown, author of numerous books about Latin America during the 18th and 19th centuries, and historian featured in film Manifest Destiny, a look at progressive imperialism. Hello, and thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me here today, Mr. Clooney, and you can call me Karen.
Alright, now tell me, Karen, about the Monroe Doctrine.
Well, the Monroe Doctrine was established in the early 19th century, and it stated that any attempts to colonize or interfere with states in Latin America would be seen as acts of terrorism that required U.S. intervention. The introduction of the Monroe Doctrine has been seen as a defining moment in U.S. foreign policy. While the policy seemed to be helping Latin American countries, it has been deeply resented by Latin American citizens for its blatant interventionism.
And that concludes our special on Latin American imperialism.
So you see, despite all of Latin America's social, economic, and political changes during this time period after independence, its countries remain remarkably unchanged.
We hope you enjoyed our program and feel much more informed in the topic. Tune in next week for another special segment.
Stay classy, Latin America.